Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. For today's video, I'm going to be doing my final part of my declutter series. I'm going to be decluttering my eyeshadow palettes. We have a lot to get through, so let's get started. I'm going to start off with these palettes in front of me. These are the palettes where I only have one from each brand. Starting off with the MAC and Stranger Things collection. This is the Property of Hawkins Tigers palette. This is a pretty palette. I just don't really use it a whole lot. So this green is really pretty, but I think I am going to pass this along. I think I've only used this once, so I'm going to declutter this. Moving on to the Dragon Fruit palette from Huda Cosmetics in collaboration with Emily Violet Marie. My palette is broken a little bit, but I'm still gonna keep this. I love it. It's an all shimmer palette. This is my first time trying the brand, so I'm really impressed with this, so I'm going to be keeping that. I just got this palette in the mail. I haven't even swatched it yet. This is the Midwinter Dream palette. This is in collaboration with Brittany Huffman. The brand is Ensley Rain Cosmetics. I'm really excited to use this. This is my first palette from the brand, so I'm going to be keeping this. I have one palette from Clarity Cosmetics. This is the Lily palette. I love this color story and I'm impressed with the quality of the palette, so I am going to be keeping this. This is from Cosmic Brushes. This is the Serenity palette. I love this palette. I love the color story of it and the quality is really good. This is my first palette from the brand, so I'm really impressed with it. I can't wait to see what else they come out with in 2023, so I'm going to be keeping this. This is a magnetic palette. I have some Sydney Grace shadows here and then my Terra Moons eyeshadows. I'm going to be keeping these. I definitely need to get a smaller magnetic palette, but for now I have this one. From Rare Beauty, this is the Magnetic Spirit palette. This is an all shimmer palette. I think it's pretty. I just don't really use this a whole lot, and I didn't use it at all last year, I don't think. So I am going to pass this one along. From JCat Beauty, this is the Noche palette. I love the shimmers in this palette, but I really cannot get behind these mattes up here. They aren't very pigmented and they're kind of hard to blend out. So I would keep this just for the shimmers, but I know I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to use it. So I am just going to pass this along. This is my only palette from Viseart. I really want to try more from the brand, but this is the Editorial Brights palette. I'm definitely going to be keeping this. It's an all matte palette, all matte rainbow palette, so I will be keeping that. From Juvia's Place, I have the Taupe palette. I really don't use shades like this, and I know someone else will get a lot of use out of it. I have only swatched this palette. I got this in a mystery box, so I know I'm not going to use it, so I will pass this along. From Milani, I have the Gilded Flora palette. I will be honest, I have not used this palette. I have swatched a couple of the shades. It is a really, really pretty palette. I just don't think I'm going to use it. I haven't used it and I've had this for maybe a year, almost a year, not quite a year, but I know I'm not going to use it, so I'm going to pass this along. I think someone else will get a lot of use out of it. From Kylie Cosmetics, I have the Grinch collaboration. I love the Grinch, I really do, but I think I'm going to get rid of this palette. It's a very green palette with a lot of neutrals, but it's going on, I think, 2 or 3 years old, and I just don't use it. I didn't use it at all last year, and I didn't use it at all this year, so I think I'm going to get rid of it. This is a brand where I definitely want to try more of. This is Ace Beauty. This is the Paletople palette. I really love the color story of this. It's very pretty. I love the quality of it. I definitely want to try more from the brand, so I might be making a purchase from there, but I am definitely going to be keeping this. From Melt Cosmetics, I have the Amore Mariposas palette. I love the color story of this palette, but I just don't really like the looks that I come up with. I think it's a pretty color story, but I don't know. There's just something about it where I just don't really use this, so I am going to pass this along. From LA Colors, this is the Hollow Queens palette. I'm really not going to use this silver shade, like gunmetal shade here. These shades are kind of similar. I haven't used this, so I might as well just keep it fresh and new for someone else, so I'm going to declutter this. Next, I have the Patrick Ta Major Dimension 2 palette. I really love the color story of this palette, and I love the quality of it. I'm definitely going to be keeping this one. From NBA Cosmetics, I have the Winter Wonderland palette. I really love the color story of this. I've used it twice now, and I love these shimmer shades here. Definitely going to be using this a lot more. I can't wait to see what else the brand comes out with. I might be purchasing some more from the brand, but I am going to be keeping this. From Charlotte Tilbury, I have the Instant Eye palette. This is the Smoky Eyes Are Forever. I like this palette. I think it's pretty, but I really just don't use this a lot, so I'm gonna get rid of it. I'm going to declutter it. I think my sister's going to take it, so I'm gonna be decluttering this. I have 2 palettes from Be Perfect Cosmetics. This is the Carnival the Antidote palette. This is a really pretty color story, but this palette is huge, and I just really don't gravitate towards big palettes, so I think I'm going to declutter this. Then I have the Carnival 3 Love Tahiti palette. Although I did just say I don't really use big palettes, I am going to keep this one. I love the color story of it. Next up, I have my Huda Beauty palettes. I have the Mercury Retrograde palette. I got this at a very good deal. I think I got this maybe half off, maybe a little more, but I think I'm going to declutter this. I really don't use it a whole lot. I just got it at the beginning of this year and I really haven't used it, so I think I'm going to pass this along. I will be keeping the Naughty Nude palette. I love this palette. I use it all the time, so I will definitely be keeping this one. I have 4 of the 9 pan palettes. This is the Khaki Haze. I like this palette, but I just don't really reach for it, so I'm going to declutter this. Same with the Purple Haze. I really like it, but again, I don't really reach for it, so I think I'm going to pass this along. And I have the Wild Chameleon palette. I do really like this palette. I think I'm going to hang on to this a little bit longer. Same with the Wild Python palette. I really like both of these, so I think I'm going to hang on to these for a little bit. Here are all of my Glam Light palettes. I have both of the collaborations with Michaela. This is the first one. I'm going to be keeping that, and then this is the second one. I will also be keeping that one. I just bought this and I just got this in the mail. I haven't even used it. I have swatched I think I've swatched 2 of these shades. This is the Strawberry Shortcake Berry Licious palette. Definitely gonna be keeping this one. I have the Ice Cream Dream palette. I love this palette, so I'm definitely gonna be keeping this one. I have the Pie palette. I love the color story of this, and I like the blush. However, I don't really use the blush when I'm using these eyeshadows, but I don't really like the packaging of it, and I just don't really use this as much as I would like to, so I am going to pass this along. I think someone else will really enjoy it. I'm also going to declutter the Margarita palette. I like the bright colors, but I just don't really use this, and I can't find myself creating like full looks with this, so I am going to pass this one along. I am going to keep the Chocolate Martini palette. I really like this palette. It's very beautiful and I love the quality of it, so I'm going to keep this. I have 2 palettes from Lethal. I'm going to be keeping both of these. I just wanted to show you the inside. These don't have names on them, so I don't know the names, but this is the first one. And then here is the second one. I am going to be keeping both of these. I have my helper back. From Anastasia Beverly Hills, I have the Nouveau palette. I am definitely going to be keeping this. I love the color story and the quality, so I'll be keeping that. However, I will be decluttering the Norvina Pro Pigment Volume 5. This is an all purple palette. I really just don't use this, so I am going to pass this along to someone else who will enjoy it. I have a couple palettes from Sydney Grace. This is the Sweet Indulgence palette. I really like the color story of this. This is going to go in my maybe pile. I am not sure. Then I have the On the Horizon palette. I really love this palette and I like the quality of it, so I am going to be keeping this. And I have the Tiny Marvels in collaboration with Mel Thompson. I love the color story of this and I'll probably never get rid of it, so I am going to keep this. I definitely need to get rid of some color pop palettes, so let's get started. I'm going to declutter the Cherry Crush palette. I got this in a mystery box and I know I'm not going to use it. I don't even think I have touched it, so I'm going to pass this along to someone else who will enjoy it. And I have the Hello Kitty Teeny Keeny palette. I love Hello Kitty, but I know I'm not going to use this. I think I've only swatched it, so I'm going to pass this along. Same with these two in collaboration with Animal Crossing. I love Animal Crossing, but I will be decluttering Nook Ink and La Belle of the Ball. I really don't use these, but I really love this color, but I know I'm just not going to reach for these, so I want someone to get some good use out of them, so I will pass them along. I will be keeping this palette in collaboration with Disney Tinkerbell. This is the Sprinkle a Little Magic palette. I love Tinkerbell, so I am definitely going to be keeping this. I'll also be keeping this little quad. This is the Free to Be. I am surprised I like this. I got this in a mystery box, and I thought I was never going to use this, but I do use it quite a bit, so I'm going to keep this. I have all three collaborations with Hocus Pocus. This is the first one. This is the Gather Around Sisters. I love the color story of this, so I'm going to keep this one. Then we have the Witching Hour. This one is okay. I wish these mattes were different. These are so similar, so I think I'm going to pass this one along. And then we have the Hocus Pocus 2. This is the third palette they came out with. I love this palette. I love the color story of it, so I am going to keep this. I have the All Amethyst palette. I think I have used this once, so I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it or not. I am going to put this in my maybe pile. I have the Star Wars Mandalorian. I like this palette. I think it is so cute. I love the green in it, so I am going to keep this. I'm going to keep the At Forest Sight palette. This is in collaboration with Raw Beauty Christie. I love this palette, love the color story of it, and I love the packaging. Going to keep that. I'm going to keep the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer palette. I really enjoy this palette. I love the color story of it, so I will be keeping that. And lastly, I will be decluttering the Lush Life palette. I like the color story of it. I just don't find myself using it a whole lot, so I'm going to pass this along to someone who will enjoy it. Here are all my Natasha Denona palettes. I'm not sure how much I'm going to get rid of, but this is the Safari palette. This is an all matte palette. I really love this palette, so I'm definitely going to be keeping it. I'm also going to be keeping the Pastel palette. I love this palette so much. I hope she comes out with more of these midi size. I'll also be keeping the Zendo palette. I heard a lot of people don't like this palette, but I actually really like it. I've gotten a lot of good use out of it, so we'll be keeping that. I think I am going to declutter the Love palette. I really don't use it a whole lot, and I prefer the retro over this, so I am going to pass this one along. I will be keeping the retro palette. Like I said, I prefer this much more than the Love palette, so I will be keeping that. I will also be keeping the Circa Loco palette. I love the color story of this. It's kind of crazy, but I enjoy it, so I will keep that. And for my minis, I am going to have to part ways with the Mini Star palette. I loved this palette. I hit pan on these two shades here, but it is very old and I have not used it in a while, so I am going to declutter this. These palettes are pretty similar. This is the Mini Crush palette and then the Mini Love palette. I think I like the Mini Crush a little bit more, so I'm going to keep the Mini Crush and pass along the Mini Love. Moving on to my Nomad palettes, I have the Hudson Valley palette. I'm going to be keeping this. This came out this year. Really beautiful palette. Love the quality of it, so keep that. I'll also be keeping the Whistler Snow Lodge palette. I think this is perfect for the winter time, so keeping that. Keeping this palette, I think it is really pretty for the spring. I love how unique this row is here. And I love these shimmers, these three shimmers here, so I will be keeping this palette. I will also be keeping these two. Love both of these for the summer. I think these are so beautiful. Really, really pretty. I definitely need to use this one some more, but I will be keeping both of these. I will be decluttering this one. I really don't use this one a whole lot, so I know someone else will get some use out of it, so I'm going to pass this one along. I have all of the palettes from Blend Bunny Cosmetics. I just got this one for Christmas. This is the first palette. This is the Blends palette, so I will be keeping this. I will just say I'm going to be keeping all of these. This is the Surge palette. Keeping that. Primal. Also keeping the Dollhouse. and all done up. I love Blend Bunny's formula. I would definitely recommend her eyeshadow palette, so keeping all of those. I have 2 palettes from Kaleidos. This is the Escape Pod palette. This was on my chopping block last year, I think, so why can't I open it? So I will be decluttering it. I have barely used it, although it is a pretty palette. I hope that they come out with more of these. Kaleidos, please come out with more of these. I'm going to declutter this one. However, I will keep the Club Nebula in collaboration with EYESHADOW. I think this is such a beautiful palette, so I will be keeping that. Here are all of my palettes from KLOVE. They used to be called Huda Beauty, so some of my palettes still say that, but they have now changed their name. I will be honest, I'm probably going to keep all of these. This is the Art Nouveau palette. Really pretty rainbow palette, keeping that. The Le Jardin palette, keeping that. And I have the Honore and Triumph of Venus, keeping both of those. And I have the Rococo palette. I really enjoy this palette, so I'll be keeping that one. This is their first palette they came out with. This is the Impressionism palette. I am going to be keeping this one. Here are all of my palettes from Odins Eye. I love Odins Eye. I think their quality is amazing. I have the Merry Christmas palette. I will be keeping. The Christmas Eve palette I will also be keeping. Then I have the Hella palette in collaboration with EYESHADOW. I will definitely be keeping this one. And I have the Alva palette. I think I'm going to declutter this. I got this in a mystery box and I know I'm just not going to use it, so I am going to pass this along even though it is a very pretty palette. Then I have the Verdandi palette. I got this in a mystery box. I know I'm not going to use this. There's some orange tones in here, but then you have these deeper shades. This blue is very pretty, but I know I'm just not going to use it, so I'm going to pass this along to someone who will enjoy it. Then I have the Solmon 2 palette. I absolutely love this palette. I think this is such a beautiful palette. Definitely going to be keeping this one. I have 2 palettes from Flower Beauty. I have the Desert Lights and Jungle Lights palette. Unfortunately, these came broken, and since they are broken, I really have not used them. This one came shattered. This one is about to pop out. I really wish they weren't broken because I know I'd probably use these, but I am going to have to toss this. I'm not going to give this to someone broken. And I think I am going to pass this one along. This one is still in good shape. This one kind of falls out, so you just have to be careful with it. But I think this is good enough to pass it along. So I will probably just toss this and I will pass this along to someone else. I have 4 palettes from Pat McGrath. I'm going to be honest, I'm probably not going to declutter any of these, but we will see. Let me open them and see. I have the Mothership Utopian Dream palette. I know I will be keeping this one. I really enjoy this palette, so I will be keeping that one. And then I have the Divine Rose 2. Definitely going to be keeping. I have hit pan on one of these shades, and I'm about to hit pan on this shade, but I will be keeping this one. I have the Celestial Divinity palette. I really like this palette. I think it's a beautiful color story, so I'm going to keep this. Then I have the Celestial Odyssey palette. This is last year's holiday palette. I think it's a pretty color story, but I think I'm going to put this in my maybe pile. From Give Me Glow Cosmetics, I have the Christmas Morning palette. I really enjoy using this palette, especially during the holidays, so I think I'm going to keep that. I have the Pastel Dreams palette. I love this palette. This is probably one of my favorites from Give Me Glow. Definitely going to be keeping that. In the Bad Witch Club palette, also going to be keeping this one. This is also one of my favorites from Give Me Glow. I have the Vintage Rose palette. I think this is a really pretty palette. I don't really use it a whole lot. It's similar to some other palettes I have in my collection, so I think I want to pass this along to someone who will really enjoy it. The Nightlife palette. I have not used this palette yet. I know I need to use it. It came with one shade missing because there was an error in production with it, so I'll have to buy a shade to put in here, but for now I am going to keep this one. I have have two palettes from Ofra. Both are in collaboration with Leora. I am going to keep both of these. This is the Beyond Words palette. Keep that. And I have the Signature palette. I will be keeping both of those. I'll also be keeping both of these from Simply Posh Cosmetics. I love this brand so much. I think the quality of the palettes and the color stories are so beautiful. This is the Fairy Tale Fairies palette and the Genuine Gems palette. I love both of these so much, so I will be keeping both of them. I have one palette from Adept Cosmetics. This is the Heather Austin palette. I'm definitely going to be keeping this. I love the color story. The shimmers in here are amazing. I definitely want to try more from the brand. I can't wait to see what else they come out with in 2023, but I will be keeping that. And I have one palette from Glam Cosmetics. This is the Nocturnal palette. Love this palette. I love the color story of it, and I love the quality of it, so I will be keeping that. Again, I definitely want to use more from Glam Cosmetics. I have two palettes from Laura Lee Los Angeles. This is the Candy Skies palette in collaboration with Erin Weaver. I love this palette. I really was not expecting to love this as much as I do, but I will be keeping this one. This is her newest palette, the Whimsical Nudes. I will definitely be keeping this. I have used this, I think, twice. Definitely want to use it some more, but I love it so far, so I'm going to be keeping that. I have two palettes from What's Up Beauty. I have the Desert Monsoon palette. I really enjoy this color story, and I love the palette, so I'm going to be keeping that. Same with the Geodes palette. I love this. I'm going to be keeping it. I cannot wait to see what else this brand comes out with in 2023. So I'll be keeping both of these. These are all my palettes from Unearthly Cosmetics. I am going to be honest. I am not going to get rid of any of these, so I am just going to show you. This is the Bunnies palette. Really beautiful color story. Keeping that. The Vitality palette. I just love Unearthly so much, so I'm going to be keeping this one. Then I have the Lore palette. Again, really love the color story. We'll be keeping that one. The Sleepover palette. Such a beautiful pink toned palette. Keeping. And the Fall Magic palette. Again, love this color story. Definitely going to be keeping. I got these for Christmas, so I haven't used them yet. This is from Fantasy Cosmetica. I have the Druid palette. This is the first palette they came out with. Really love this color story. I can't wait to use these. So keeping all of these. Then I think she came out with the Sorcerer palette. Really beautiful. And then last but not least, the Bard palette. Really beautiful. I love the color stories. I can't wait to see what else she comes out with, but I am going to keep all three of these. I have these three palettes from Made by Mitchell. I am going to keep these, but I think I'm going to try to deconstruct them and put them in a magnetic palette. Some shades that I like I probably won't keep, you know, like some of these shades, but some of the brighter shades I will keep. So for now, I'm going to keep all of these. This is the Head in the Clouds, Feet on the Ground, and Do You Want Some Milk. I'll be keeping all three of these. I feel like I did not get rid of enough palettes, so I'm gonna go through these one more time and try to decide and see if I can declutter any more palettes. I went through my maybe pile. I decided I'm going to declutter the Huda Beauty Wild Chameleon palette. I like the color story, but I just don't find myself using it a whole lot, and I really want someone else to get some good use out of it, so I will declutter that. Also decluttering the Python palette, same thing. I love the color story in the palette, but I just really don't get that much use out of it since I have so many palettes, so I will pass that along. Same with the All Amethyst palette. I bought this because it's my birthstone, but again, I really don't wear purpley shades like this, so I will pass this along. Can't believe I'm doing this, but I am decluttering the Celestial Odyssey palette. I got this last year, and there are some shades that I haven't even touched yet, so I'm okay with parting ways with this. And I will keep the Sweet Indulgence palette. There are some single Sydney Gray shades that I might switch out with like these two to make it a palette more compatible for what I like, so I am going to keep this. I cannot believe I'm doing this, but I found a couple more palettes that I am going to declutter. I decided to declutter the Celestial Divinity palette. Although I do like the color story, I just think it's time for me to let it go. And the Give Me Glow Christmas Morning palette. I do love this palette, but I just use it during Christmas time and then I don't use it after that, so I am going to pass this along. And the Mandalorian Star Wars palette in collaboration with ColourPop. I do really like these greens, but I just don't really use this palette a whole lot, so we'll pass this along. I can't believe I'm doing this, but the Impressionism palette from KLOVE, it says Muse Beauty on it, but it is KLOVE. I do really like this palette. I like the colors, but I just can't really find like a full look. Like I can, but like I don't really use these warm tones a whole lot, and then these greens, but it is very pretty, but I just don't really reach for it a whole lot. So I do love the brand, but I am going to pass this palette along. And I have the Give Me Glow Nightlife palette. I did take out one shade and keep it, but I think I am going to just give this to someone else. And the Be Perfect Cosmetics Carnival 3 Love Tahiti palette. When I reach for a colorful palette, I go for my Blend Bunny. I don't really reach for this as much, so I'd rather have my Blend Bunny over this, so I am going to pass this one along. Here are all the palettes that I am decluttering. I'm decluttering a total of 42 eyeshadow palettes. I'm really proud of this. I didn't expect to declutter that much, but yeah, here's an overview of everything. I might have some of these linked in my Poshmark to sell. Other than that, I will give most of these away to friends and family, but that is everything for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I know this is probably a long one, but make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Also, follow my Instagram, Logan K Makeup, and I will see you in my next one. Bye everyone, have a good one.